Each week we have a reading from Swami Kriyanandaji's book, Living Wisely, Living Well. These are very short, sometimes a little bit longer sayings for each day of the year. And today's might be one of the shortest and simplest. For June 27, if you want to enjoy life, take yourself less seriously. And he's talking about our little self, our lower self, the ego. Take yourself less seriously. You'll notice that children, smaller children, they don't take themselves very seriously. There's a childlike purity of heart that we are born with, which is more of our true nature. And you'll see that for most people, as they start to come into the teen years especially, they start to become very self-conscious. They start to be worried all the time about what other people are thinking about them, the impression that they make, how they look, the clothes that they wear. And they start taking themselves more seriously, and not in a good way. And many people outgrow this tendency. Many people don't. They go through the rest of their lives always worried about what other people think about them, about making a mistake, and when they do, concerned that they will be seen as a fool or as a child. And you'll see that the saints especially overcome this. The saints can be very childlike and not concerned at all with what others think about them. They are purely and simply themselves, just as children are. And all children are different. It's not like all children are the same self. They are themselves. Swami Kriyanandaji, I often say, one of my favorite expressions of his was something I heard him say at least twice. He said, "To thine own funky self be true." And he was paraphrasing a famous quote, "To thine own self be true." But Swamiji said, "To thine own funky self be true," saying we are what we are. We each have our own nature, and it doesn't have to be super exalted or great in the eyes of others. Just simply be yourself. You will find over time that in fact, people will respect you more for being yourself rather than putting on pretense or a false show or a covering of your true self. You'll also find that when you do this, you tend to be more relaxed and natural with people. And there's just more of a transparency between your heart and the hearts of others when you're not trying to hide or protect or cover or take yourself too seriously. And so one of the great ways to do this is to be more childlike, be more simple, be more pure, and don't try to cover up who you are. Now, the greatest way to overcome this tendency towards being self-conscious, because that's really what it is, we're overly self-conscious. It's not simply about taking ourselves seriously. It's also about taking what others think about ourselves very, very seriously. And the way to get over this attachment to others' perception of us, to our own ego attachment to wanting to look good in all things, is simply to start to dissolve the little self in the infinite self. And you will find that when you do this, you start to fulfill what Swamiji says here. And there's really a deep, almost scriptural truth to this. If you want to enjoy life, take yourself less seriously. And when we take this little self less seriously, when we dissolve the ego, we find that we start to experience our true nature, which is divine joy, divine bliss. And so when we take ourselves less seriously, we start to tune into the infinite. Now, the ways to do this are many. Most importantly is to offer the little self into the infinite self on a regular basis, every day if you can, all the time if you can. You can do this moment to moment by what Yoganandaji called practicing the presence of God. You can perform japa or simply be in the presence of the divine, offering yourself again as a child. You'll find that this is one of the ways especially that Yoganandaji recommended that we worship God as a child, in worshiping God as the Divine Mother. And when we practice the presence of God in that way, of worshiping God as a child, our childlike nature tends to come out more. And we start to, I wouldn't say go back to this childlike nature, which can be childish. It's more like we transmute and tune into this higher octave of the childlike quality that you see in the saints. And you'll see that saints have this very childlike nature, very often because they relate to God as the Heavenly Father and the Divine Mother, and they're simply the divine child. The way to this is self-offering also in meditation. Pray to God as the Father, the Mother, and you'll find that again, this dissolves this little self and we start to identify with our divine nature. When you are talking and have to give a lecture, you'll see that, and many of us here at Ananda Sangha have to do this. I've been doing this for about 40 years, and so I have a lot of practice with it. It still took me a long time, even though I understood these spiritual principles and the philosophy. It took me a long time to learn how to be relaxed and at ease and not be worrying so much about what others think about me, how I look, how I talk, whether they're going to think I'm intelligent or spiritual or all these things. And if we can just let all of those things go and simply be ourselves, simply be a child of the infinite, and express ourselves from the heart and without the filter of what others are thinking about us, then you'll find that divine expression comes more easily. This is one of the great things I learned from my wife, Maria, just before she passed away, in her last few weeks of her life, and she knew that she was getting ready to leave the body. What happened was very interesting. The filter between her heart and what she said was completely gone. And it was very interesting to see. You could almost see it in action, because when she spoke, it came entirely from her heart and what she felt. And there was no filter of the mind saying, what are people going to think about what I say now? How are people going to react? But it also allowed her to be able to express affection, divine love, kindness, all the qualities that were there all the time, and she very often expressed. But that filter of the mind was completely out of the way. And I learned a lot from this. I learned that it's actually a very good way to live, not waiting till the last few weeks of your life, but just to live more in this consciousness that if we can remove the filter of the mind saying, what's this person going to think if I express affection or kindness, or tell them of my love for them, or different expressions of childlike nature. And if we don't worry about those things anymore, then our true self and the true expression of our heart comes forth in a divine way. And we can become more easily channels of the divine when we start acting in this way. One of the ways to do this also is just to get the idea of pride out of the way. Don't worry about whether people insult us, praise us. And this is a tricky thing on the spiritual path. Yoganandaji taught to try to see praise and blame as equal. And when people praise us and blame us, we tend to get up and down with the praise and the blame when we don't have that spiritual maturity. Someone praises us for how good we do something, the boss commends us for something, and we feel good, and then someone starts pointing their finger and yelling at us and blaming us, we start to feel small. And if we can transcend this reaction to praise and blame and try to see them all as equal, we will find that, again, life is more enjoyable because we don't have the ups and downs, but more importantly, our joy is not dependent on what others think about us, say to us, praise or blame, trying to be equal. I had this experience recently in terms of blame, and it's fun going through life and sort of seeing mileposts on the spiritual path and seeing just little tests that come up that maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago we didn't do so well, but then they come up again, which God gives us many, many chances to learn and to grow. And then they come up again and we see that we've completely overcome a particular test. And I saw this recently. I was reapplying for my annual visa renewal with the Indian government. And as we were filing some paperwork, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I filled out some paperwork improperly. And I filled it and gave it at this police office to these police officers. And these particular police officers were very bureaucratic and proud and trying to display their authority and power. And when I handed the papers, he looked at it and he saw that I had filled it out improperly, and he took it very seriously, and he threatened me, and he said, "We could take up charges against you for this." And he was threatening me with arrest and filing charges. And just somehow, because I have this childlike nature developing perhaps more and more, I felt like a little child, as if some police officer had told a 5-year-old child, "We're going to arrest you for something." And I just laughed and laughed inwardly. I couldn't laugh in his face because I didn't want to insult him and make the situation worse. But I did laugh inside and was very calm about it. And because of that, partly I think that the situation was diffused and he just let it go. And I think he was trying to get a reaction out of me, perhaps, trying to make me afraid. And so try to overcome this tendency to react. And again, I think part of the way is to be more childlike. Again, I'm learning over these years, strangely enough, as I get older, to be more childlike, that when someone praises me for something that I've done, a talk that I've given or something that I've said, I've learned just to laugh inwardly again with delight, as if they were praising a 5-year-old child for giving a great lecture. And what would a 5-year-old child do if they were praised for something like that? They would probably just laugh and laugh, like, how could a child possibly do such a thing? And that's how I feel about it when I hear praise that way. And so praise and blame are equal in this dream of God's. And if we can learn just to accept both of them equally, then this is a great victory, actually, because then we find that our joy in life comes not from what people say about us, what they say to us, the things that happen to us. And we find that this is the joy of God, which again, there is a really childlike quality to this. Now, another way to work with this, developing this less self-importance in our lives, is to always think of giving to others, loving others, serving others. And when we do this without any thought of what's in it for us, then everything changes. Because what happens is that when we give to others without, this is true nishkam karma, what happens is that there's no sense of return, and there's no sense of doing it because of what others are going to think about us. And so in these situations, if people praise us, they blame us, it's all a self-offering to God. And whatever, we're not doing it for the response. We're doing it purely as a devotional, childlike offering to the divine. And in that process, there is a great deal of growing and developing freedom. So make this a regular practice in your life. Now, pride is one of the greatest obstacles to enjoying life and to taking ourselves seriously. There's a famous story that many of you, I'm sure, know. And it's about the great sage Brigu. Brigu was the son of Brahma. And there was a great ceremony, a yagya happening. And they weren't sure, the people who were doing this, all these great sages who were performing it, were trying to decide who to have as the presiding deity in charge of it all. And they couldn't decide whether to choose Brahma, Vishnu, or Shiva. And so they assigned the young sage at that time, Brigu, to find out who was the most worthy. And so first he went to his father's home where he was studying. He was a great sage, Brahma. He knew the whole universe and helped to create the whole universe. And so he went into Brahma's room, and Brahma was studying and meditating or something. And Brigu, just to test his father, barged in unannounced, was somewhat rude and haughty. And his father got very, very upset and just got very angry with him. And so Brigu realized, okay, there's a flaw here, that maybe he's not the greatest and not the one that we should choose for doing this ceremony. So he went to Shiva's lair, which was up in the Himalayas. And there he went. Shiva was meditating, covered with ash, looking like Shiva does all the time. And Shiva just very warmly greeted him. And so it's the great sage, child sage Bhrigu come to see me. And he hugged this sage Bhrigu. And Bhrigu just pushed Shiva away, again as a test. He says, look at you, you're covered with filth, and I have all this dirt all over me now, and you've covered me with your filth. Why did you hug me? And Shiva got very upset and just about turned him to ashes by his look, and Bhrigu went running away before he could do that. He realized that, well, Shiva wasn't perhaps the best and the most flawless, and he also was taking himself too seriously, just like his father was. So then he went to Vishnu. And I think at this point, Bhrigu was thinking that all three of these were probably unworthy of leading this great ceremony. But he thought, okay, I'll try Vishnu and see what he's up to and how he takes himself and looks at himself. So he went to Vishnu, and Vishnu was asleep, as he does reclining. And if you recline too much, as Vishnu would do, enjoying this creation, he would probably fall asleep a lot, as we do when we recline a lot. And so he went to Vishnu, and he started kicking Vishnu and tried to wake him up by kicking him, just to test him, see how he would respond. And finally, Vishnu just woke up. And at that moment, Bhrigu kicked him really hard, right in the chest, just really violently in the chest, knocked him back. And Vishnu just woke up, and with just great love and compassion, he held Bhrigu's foot and said, oh, my dear child Bhrigu, have you hurt your foot? You hit it so hard against my chest. How is your foot? And he started caressing his foot, fearing that it might be broken. And Bhrigu realized that Vishnu was the greatest. He did not take himself seriously. Why? Because he loved everyone with deep compassion, with kindness, and with love. And so this is the answer again, is if you love others with no expectation of return, when they insult us, when they hurt us, when they say bad things about us, when they try to make us look foolish, we respond with love and kindness, and it does not affect us. Swami Kriyanandaji often told a story about a great saint, similar to this story that I just told about Bhrigu and his test. And this saint was wandering through a village near the ashram where he had his disciples, and as he wandered through the village boys started teasing him. They just saw this ragged-looking guy, and they thought they would harass him and make fun of him. And finally, they began throwing stones at him just to really harass him. And one of the stones hit him in his face and cut him, and he started bleeding. And he went back to the ashram where his disciples were, and they were so upset and concerned. And the saint was just laughing and laughing, and the disciples asked, what happened to you? Why are you laughing? He says, oh, the boys in the village, they were having so much fun throwing stones and trying to hit me, and one of them hit me, and he just laughed and laughed and laughed. And he did not take himself seriously. And when you don't take yourself seriously, you will find joy in everything that comes to you, in everything in life. Now, one of the things that Swami Kriyananda talked about was trying to see yourself as just playing a role in the stream of God's. He had a seemingly very important role, but he didn't take himself very seriously. And it was so interesting, because if anyone that I've ever met in my life could take himself seriously, it was Swami Kriyanandaji. Here he wrote 150 or so books, several hundred pieces of music, started all these communities, was a world-famous lecturer and speaker. But he had this very childlike attitude. Partly he saw that it was God flowing through him, but he was also not attached to his own self and did not take himself seriously. The way he put it one time is that he said he saw Swami Kriyananda as an event for which he was responsible. And so he didn't think that I am Swami Kriyananda and take himself seriously and over-identify with the little self. He identified more with the infinite, and he saw that Swami Kriyananda was this role, and he was responsible for that role, and he acted out that role the best that he could. And just like an actor, if you're an actor in a play or in a movie, and in the scene someone insults you or harasses you, would the actor get really upset and actually get out of his role and start punching back and getting all violent? No, he wouldn't. He would realize that it's just a role, this is just a drama, this is just a dream. I'm playing this role and I'll play it the best I can. And when someone insults me or praises me, it's just part of this play. It's just part of this role I'm playing. It's part of the role that they're playing. Now, Swami Kriyanandaji also talked about this in the context of overcoming self-importance. And this is what he wrote about it. He said, self-importance is the death of wisdom. It is best combated by a light sense of humor. Especially learn to laugh at yourself. Never feel that to lack a sense of humor is to show greater dignity. True dignity means to be centered within. It doesn't mean to be pompous. Rather, it means to be inwardly relaxed and centered in one's inner self, regardless of whether life's circumstances sweep you left or right, forward or back. Always try to retain your inner mental balance. Self-importance increases inner tension and thereby reduces one's true happiness. You will also find that self-importance reduces your effectiveness in everything that you do, especially when relating to others. Again, I find this with public speaking, giving satsangs or lectures, that if you treat yourself as being really important, it does create tension. It creates littleness, and it inhibits or limits your ability to tune into the divine and to be a channel for the divine. And when we can get rid of self-importance, we get ourselves out of the way so that the divine can more easily flow through us. Now, Swamiji also says, I have emphasized the importance of keeping a good sense of humor. Always remember, too, that the underlying reality of everything is bliss. Seek bliss at the heart of everything. Laugh with bliss. And this is an interesting thing. He commented on this many times about laughter, because he laughed a lot. I don't know that I haven't known anyone in my life who laughed as much as he did. The organization that he formerly was in, SRF, after he left, I was talking to one of his former brother monks who had lived there with Swami Kriyananda. And he said that when Swami Kriyananda was here, the halls rocked with laughter. And he said it with a little bit of wistfulness, as if the halls were not rocking with so much laughter after he left. And he was like that, Swamiji. There was so much laughter. But it was not the type of laughter that was a nervous laughter or an uncentered laughter where he could not control it and lost control. It was a blissful, deep, joyful laughter of God's play, seeing the humor in all things. And he also saw the humor in his own life when he did something that attracted undue attention to himself. He was able to laugh even at himself, especially at himself. And he didn't laugh at others in a cruel way. He laughed just at the folly of this dream at times. And you'll find that when you can see this as the dream of God in some way, you'll find that it's just, you enjoy it more. And Yoganandaji said this, when you take this life too seriously and take yourself too seriously, then it's not just unpleasant, it's a torture in a way. And he called it the beatings of the world affect us and will just get to us. But when we can be free inside, centered inside, as Swamiji said, and when we can see this truly as God's dream, and this doesn't mean to be cold or impersonal to others because it's just a dream. That's one of the rudest things that you can say to someone who's suffering, is just to say, oh, it's just a dream. You're not really suffering, because they need compassion and kindness at those times. So live as if this is God's dream, and then serve others, and don't try to beat them over the head with that concept. But you'll find that if you can do this to the extent that you can, you will feel joy inside. Swamiji also says, a temptation on the spiritual path is to tell oneself that whatever he is doing is important. Life, essentially, is a dream. You will enjoy that dream best if you can learn not to take it too seriously. And so don't take your role in this dream drama too seriously. Yes, we have duties, responsibilities. We must act them out as if our role is serious, raising a family, having a spouse, dealing with financial issues in our life and helping others. Yes, we have to be practical. We have to take these things seriously. But give the results to God. And again, try to see this as a divine dream. I have found that when I act in this way, putting out the best energy that I can, but also seeing that in the end, this is the dream of Divine Mothers, and that's her dream. She's in charge of her dream. And she'll do things that seem crazy at times. But I find that when I act in this way, that things actually go much better. And it's not that I can act irresponsibly or lazily or haphazardly, but if I act properly, diligently, responsibly, but at the same time enjoy this as this dream of God's, things tend to flow much more smoothly and easily. And then finally, Swamiji says, my microphone just came off. Finally, Swamiji says, never think a position of authority gives you power over anyone. See even the highest position as an opportunity to serve others, not to be served by them. This is a very important truth. When you're in a position of responsibility or authority, there's a tendency to increase this sense of self-importance. And I have found that it's just a joyful practice to see myself as servant of all. And this is just really what we came here to do, is to serve others. And if we do this in the right way, it is just to see ourselves as a servant. And we're here to help others, to give to others, to love others, not from a position of authority or leadership in the traditional sense, but simply as their friend. And when we can act in this way, our self-importance reduces, our joy increases. It's very, very simple. It's almost a mathematical formula. As self-importance decreases, divine joy increases. And so all these ways that I've been talking about are ways to practice this, to increase joy, to decrease self-importance. And in the end, as we make our efforts to do these things, give the results to God. When we make a mistake, try to laugh at ourselves when we make the mistake. Give that result to God. I'll do better next time, Lord. And this was pretty funny that I totally messed up this time. And so you'll find that, again, this is the way to divine freedom. And these great masters have taught us the way. All we simply have to do is practice what they taught, and we will become free. May our lives be filled with that joy of the divine, and again with this decrease of egoic self-importance. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.